Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Impact 2023 Salary Survey Report on the web. Our two presenters today are myself, Kurt Wilbrandt, and Drew Kunkel. Originally, we had Matt Peel, who's the company president, participating because he works with all of our different placement groups, but he got called out on an urgent business matter, and Drew was kind enough to substitute in. In terms of focus, I work on IT and human resource positions predominantly. Drew works on finance and engineering roles. So between the two of us, we should be able to cover the bulk of the roles that Impact is involved in placing. Drew, say hello to the crowd.
Appreciate everybody listening in or watching, if you're watching after the fact. So yeah, as Kurt mentioned, we recruit on accounting, finance, engineering, and IT. Those are our core areas, contract and permanent, and throughout the US, but offices in Michigan and Florida. So that's the emphasis of kind of where we're at. This is geared towards both job seekers and employers. So we'll give you kind of insight on both sides of the fence on kind of this salary survey. And the beginning of it, first handful of slides will be more geared towards kind of the data set that we used and the people that were involved in the survey, just to give you a kind of a backdrop of where we got some of the information.
Yeah, we're going to keep this as kind of an open format too. If you have questions along the way, feel free to either put them in the chat or to unmute yourself and chime in.
So as you can see out of that first slide, are you currently employed? Most of the people involved in this survey are currently employed, full-time at least. That's the bulk of it. Seen a little bit of an uptick since last year.
Yep, and by taking a 3-year window, we obviously are still including some of the details we had during COVID. So these numbers were pretty much in line with what we were expecting in terms of who's working and who's not.
Where do you work? That's been a topic of discussion lately. On-site, hybrid, remote. We've seen a lot of people return to the workforce over the past year. A lot of employers bringing people back on site, which is probably why we see, on-site being a little bit heavier. So this is just, this isn't historical, but this is just this year, this time around. This is kind of how it's looking.
Yeah, I would say that that's somewhat fluid too. Employers are still experimenting with what's the best mix between hybrid, on-site, or full remote.
Experience level, and this kind of ties into where our focus is at Impact Business Group, which is mid-level to higher level professional positions. So don't do a ton on the strictly entry level side of things, but starting at the entry mid-level is kind of where you see it. And then the mid-level, mid to senior level positions, there's just a lot more of them than say the executive C-suite roles, of course. So that's with this survey, you can see that mid to senior level people are the bulk of who participated.
We were happy to actually see these results because it is fairly representative of how most corporations are organized. So this tells us we got a fair blend of folks who did respond to the survey to give us this data.
Recent job titles. This is just a quick snapshot of the job titles that we saw, for people that are involved in the salary survey. So, and it's pretty reflective at a glance of a lot of the core positions that we recruit on a daily basis. So just to give you a little bit of context. Demographics. Kurt, you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, this gives us a good breakdown of which actual, on the demographics piece, job duties different respondents participated in. Engineering was one of the larger respondents, which doesn't surprise me because we've seen a major uptick in our engineering and supply chain roles in the recent months. So despite any gloom and doom you're hearing in the media, the folks who are manufacturing and designing products are still going strong. And then as to where are you located, we have 2 primary office locations, but we actually work on positions nationwide, and we have staff working in over 25 states and growing. And so this pie chart just gives you a nice breakdown of where the different respondents came from.
Yep. A lot of, I mean, we're in just about every state. So kind of just lumped it all into the other section for sake of the showing the data. How many years experience do you have in your career field? So this is, you know, kind of reflective to, again, the bulk of the opportunities we focus on the higher level stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of people in that 15+ year mark, a lot of people in the mid-level to senior staff. And I'll note, and this may be obvious, but you know, you can be a 15-20+ year person and still be, you know, mid-level, or you can be a 10-year person and be a C-suite executive. So keeping that in mind when you look at the data set, but just to give you kind of a snapshot of the level of generally the level of people that are participating.
So remote versus on-site. This is a hot topic these days in hiring. The key thing that I took away from it was that 59% responded they're either working fully remote or hybrid remote. And as candidates come in to talk to us, unless they have a position that requires them to be 100% on site, that's one of the top things candidates are looking for, is that flexibility as to where they sit to actually do their work. Some of the breakdown was just if you are hybrid, then, you know, how much time are you spending in the office? And we did a nice comparison between 2021 and 2022. So you can see things are fairly consistent, but they are shifting. Any questions on this slide? I mean, for most of you folks who are on the webinar here, how often are you in your own office at your company?
Yeah, we definitely seen a lot of people get called back on site, but a lot of companies have realized obviously that remote work's been working and have stayed the course with that. So further on that, remote or hybrid. Obviously on site is in the engineering capacity specifically. A lot of those roles, it's just there's no way around it, right? You got to be on site. Some of them are impossible to be remote. So it makes sense. And when you look at IT roles, obviously it's very predominantly remote based in a lot of cases.
Yeah, we're also seeing that with some of the finance and accounting related roles as well. Since anyone who works predominantly on a computer for their job, they're going to have more flexibility for working remote than, say, a product engineer or someone in the production space who has to be on site where things are being produced.
Yep.
Now go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. You know, how's the on-site or remote work impacting how you view your current employer? And yeah, I think the most important is looking at the negative and positive. The neutral doesn't tell us a ton. You know, some of the people that answered neutral on working on site, of course, you know, it sometimes doesn't matter, right? When we talk about engineers, manufacturing engineers and people like that, it's like they don't really have a choice, of course. But you know, remote workers, obviously that's overwhelmingly positive. You know, they love working from home in their slippers and sweatpants, of course. And on-site people, it's you know, that is 18% voted negative on there. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that could do their job remote and would love to, but fortunately have those restrictions.
Yeah, so that slide was just more of a self-evaluation of your own environment, and definitely folks would prefer to work from home if possible.
Any jobs you had in the past 90 days? So from 2022 to 2023, went down, but so 28% said they had applied for 0 jobs in the past 90 days compared to 51% in 2022. So Kurt, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this one.
Yeah, this is somewhat interesting. It's got some inverted logic as to how you evaluate it, but with more people working, it just shows that people are less actively applying to things at the moment than they have traditionally over the last couple of years. And you can kind of see the breakdown with the graph there in terms of just how aggressive are people being in applying to new positions or not.
How many jobs have you applied for in the past 90 days?
This one's
Yeah,
by industry segment or job role in
yep,
terms of related to the last one, but it breaks it down for you as to what we're seeing across the different products that we support.
yep. A lot less people applying for jobs right now, making the talent market that much tighter. So this is an interesting one that we're always striving to understand better when we post our ads is, what about the job posting encourages you to apply? And it's overwhelmingly compensation is listed. So that's important. I mean, it's not always the most important factor, of course, for whether or not you're going to make a change, but it seems on the front end when job seekers are looking, it's one of the most important things that they want to see out there. And I think something to note there too, and this is just something for the job seekers out there. If you see a comp range that is maybe just below your target, say you're targeting 90K and above for a new opportunity, and you see an ad out there that fits perfect on everything and hits on all marks, that's tops out at 80 or 85. I mean, I would suggest still putting your application in, because not always that top comp range that's on the ad is always the real top comp range that employers will post or agencies will post. So I think if it's close, I wouldn't shy away from applying. So don't always think that that's the gospel when you see compensation listed on job postings.
Yeah, this is definitely a hot topic for candidates right now. We have some states that are actually legislating that compensation ranges have to be included in job postings, but usually there's a broad range given. The truth is employers will pay based on experience level and the number of skills that you've acquired. And so it is helpful to have that number there to know if a position is worth your time or not. But it does require still some flexibility as you go through the interview cycle. The thing that most employers, are trying to do is give a fair and market competitive salary when they offer the position to someone. But it's almost individualized to each person and their overall experience level. And sometimes with a position, depending on your skill set, if that lines up really strongly, the company may have some flexibility in terms of elevating a position to gain more compensation, or they may be able to use a lower level position for someone who's not as qualified but has the core skills they need. So we'd be curious to know what's important to any of you when you're actually evaluating a job posting.
Yeah. One of the most important job satisfaction factors. See, salary, it's up there.
Usually is.
Of course. But company culture is looks like it's a close second, or work from home flexibility would probably be coming in close second. Third, company culture, which of course that's always dependent, but But yeah, those, it makes sense, right? Those being the top three. Work from home flexibility wouldn't have probably been even on the graph 10 years ago, right, Kurt?
Right.
Huge thing nowadays.
Hold on a second, Drew. Mark's saying we may have a question. Give me 1 second to get to the chat.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get to the question. I'm technically challenged today for some reason.
Though I will say when I talk with candidates, often company culture is the number one, at least what people say, right? But company culture is, from my experience, the number one deciding factor on any given opportunity when somebody makes a switch. But I suppose it's all relative in how far off that salary really might be. Not sure if there was a question, but maybe we can come back to it.
There was. I was just muted.
Oh, okay.
The question was about using non-domestic professionals as an extension of the work from home option as a way to reduce costs. And that has been tried, but we're not seeing it in the tech side. We're not seeing as big a push for offshoring roles as we have in the past. We still are seeing a strong demand for having either consultants or permanent hire staff that are based here in the US and ideally in the same time zone as the customer we're supporting. So offshoring right now doesn't seem to be a hot topic, but it is still one of the factors that affects compensation ranges and how positions do get filled.
What are your career plans? Let's see. Actively looking for new job opportunities in 2021. Of course, that one was a super hot one, and then we've seen it decline. The market's gotten tighter for finding good talent out there. There's no doubt about that. We've seen that over the past couple of years change pretty drastically. So not planning on looking for new job opportunities. That's gone down. I'm open to hearing about opportunities, gone up. Be looking for new opportunities, but I haven't started yet. Stayed pretty consistent. So
yeah, I think the key indicator there is someone open to hearing about new opportunities. It comes back to satisfaction with your current employer related to cost of living adjustments or career growth opportunities or training. So while someone isn't maybe actively pushing to get out the door, they are more open to hearing about something new that can improve their work life based on those other factors we've been seeing in the survey.
It lines up. That definitely lines up with a lot of conversations we've had over the past year or so. What is your compensation range? And we were talking about this earlier as we saw compensation ranges increase quite a bit over the past few years, but in this past year, we've seen it start to level off. Over the 100K range, there you can see there was a little bit of a bump, but in general, we've seen it taper off a little bit.
Yeah, we think the numbers given here just show, again, we had a good blend of respondents to the survey, people in each of the different salary brackets, and a couple of modest increases at the higher level, but at the lower levels, not so much.
Compensation range by career field. So I'll note that the other category, typically how we categorize it will be sales roles, HR positions, which we do work on a ton of still, administrative, customer service. So kind of all lumped them into one category just to keep things a little bit simple. But yeah, in terms of compensation range by career field, I mean, you can see over the 100K range, IT. Keep in mind, it's the data set of this salary survey, so don't go thinking if you're not in IT, you got to jump into programming to make over 100K, but certainly a great career field.
Yeah, a lot of tech is being implemented, I think, to make up for the fact that there's just not enough staff to fill all the roles out there. So companies are being more aggressive about trying to automate anything they can or upgrade things that were postponed due to COVID.
That's a fact. That's a hot topic. That's a spicy one right now. Has your salary been adjusted for inflation? Yeah, it's overwhelmingly no. I don't think I've ran into a scenario where I've talked with a candidate or an employer really over the past year that has said, due to inflation, we're raising everybody's salary by X%. We just don't see it, unfortunately. With that said, if you're in a situation where you're running into there's a very big gap between where you think you should be in your level of profession and where the market is. We see that easily resolved as just switching careers, not switching careers entirely, but switching employers and switching positions and getting that increase by making a job change. And Kurt, you can speak to that a little bit too, on as far as employers opting to hire outside as opposed to giving their salaried employees raises to account for inflation.
Right. When you have an incumbent population of employees and then inflation is aggressively hammering all of us. I don't want to talk about the price of eggs right now because I just had to buy some. But the challenge is when you have a large population of employees, to give all of them a cost of living increase is a substantial dollar amount. We all tend to individualize, what's happening to my paycheck. But the C-level folks, when they're evaluating that, I've talked to them before about the fact that cost of living adjustments can uptick your turnover rates. And everyone knows that it's much more expensive to replace a person than it is to adjust compensation for both performance and for cost of living. And the feedback I've gotten is that is true, but it would be such a huge uptick in cost to the business. We would have changed pricing downstream to everyone else, which feeds the inflation engine. And when the finance folks risk assessing that, they feel it's safer to pay the gaffe, if you will, when someone leaves versus addressing it on the front end with their entire staff. And so they view it as less risky, even though they do know there is a risk there because of the costs involved. So it's somewhat complicated. Inflation complicates everything when it comes to compensation. What we need is for the economy to calm back down and prices to stabilize. But what this survey did show is that very few firms have been adjusting compensation for inflation, which means we're all in the same boat together as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're worried that you're not with the rest of the pack and everybody else is getting raises to adjust to inflation, you're not alone there.
Yeah. But to Drew's point earlier, this has been a trend for a long time where organizations, if they get stuck in the way that they handle their compensation levels, the only other option to us as candidates is to then make a change to a new employer, take the skills and experience I have and find an employer who's staffing up, who's willing to give me that increase. It's not specific to cost of living, but that is the primary way you're going to advance your compensation as opposed to staying put where you've been for the last 5 or 10 years. Once you're an incumbent, that kind of sets the baseline for what raises will come down the road. And so if you really need to make a change because inflation is hurting the family budget, then you may need to consider then finding a new employer who can put a higher value on your skill set and your experience.
So, and that ties right into this question: what sort of salary increase would you need to receive to make a job change? So typically 10% is what we see on average when any given person makes a job change to a step up in their career, or maybe not even a step up in terms of responsibility or job title, but just makes a move. And if they get that higher compensation, it's usually around 10%. What do people need? This question, of course, making an assumption here, but the 20% or higher probably ties back into the data set of the people that responded to the survey, and that we saw in one of those earlier slides. A lot of people are just open to looking right now and aren't actively looking. They're what we call passively looking. So you're in a good situation now, not looking to jump out the door. Sure, you'd probably need a little extra cash to make that leap. You might need a 20% bump to get you out of the seat that you're in now. So I assume that's why we're seeing a 30%, 35, 38% in the 20% or higher category. To make a switch and get a 20% bump in pay, I'm not saying it's unheard of, but 10% is more typical. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at new opportunities, and maybe, ask yourself what compensation you're looking at going forward, and does it line up with the market, and is it reasonable?
Yeah, I would say that, a lot of what you can expect in terms of a percentage increase is going to be very dependent on supply and demand. How in demand are your skills in the market where you're working, and how many folks are you competing with for a given role? Employers really prefer to be in that 5 to 10% range. 10% is a fairly safe and historical number. But if you have a specialty skill set, it's a new ERP system, new technical skills and engineering that everybody's trying to move to, then you can expect most likely a higher percentage, again, because demand is exceeding supply in that case. But what we tend to do is we'll evaluate that on a case-by-case basis with each candidate when we meet them, and kind of run through what we call their job search profile. We'll try to help them come up with a better expectation for the change that they may want to make. And if somebody's way over market, we're going to be very honest about that. And usually someone spends up to 90 days looking where their expectations are out of line with market before they come back to us and then ask us to find them a position that gives them a reasonable increase. But our focus is, we can ask for the moon, but we need to be in line with what the market is willing to offer, and the employers set those levels, not staffing companies.
Yep. And on the flip side, I mean, we're very consultative with our clients too on the employer side of things. If the type of person they're looking to hire, that unicorn sometimes, so to speak, is just not lining up with the compensation range that they're willing to pay. I mean, we're always going to let them know, hey, you want X, but that's going to cost 10K, 12K, 20K more than what your budget is. So we give everybody a realistic expectation on both sides.
Yeah, definitely supply and demand affects both employers and candidates. So
no doubt. We worked with a staffing agency before. So of course, if you got our emails about the salary survey, you probably worked with us before, or hopefully some capacity or another. So a big percentage of yes. There's quite a few questions here that came in that we kind of wanted to address and clear up, and hopefully, just give you guys some clarification on certain things that maybe you ran into with recruiters, or certain frustrations or questions. So Kurt, you want to address that first?
Sure. I mean, what we wanted is honest opinions from the folks responding. If they haven't worked with an agency, why haven't they? And one of the responses was recruiters they talk to don't understand their background. And we hear that all the time. Most of our staff have had industry jobs somewhere prior to being cross-trained in recruiting and talent acquisition. So most of us have worked in industry before we chose to go down this path. So I like to believe that gives us the ability to better understand what you specifically have been doing and then help give you better advice on where you should go next. But we do know a number of firms strictly hire people right out of college that maybe their focus was in human resources and they haven't worked in industry yet, but they're being trained by some of the staffing companies in very structured business processes to go through a person's background so they can submit them to a role. For those folks, a lot of times when they're trying to match a person to a role, they're playing a little game I like to call buzzword bingo, where if enough buzzwords in your resume match the buzzwords in their job description, they can raise their hand and yell bingo, they have a match. For us, if the buzzwords in your resume match the buzzwords in the job description, we just view it as we have a good basis for talking to you further and then getting a better understanding of what's important to you as well as what your strengths are. And we do the same with our clients. Wherever we're allowed to, we'll talk to the hiring managers to really get the inside scoop on who it is they need to hire, because most job descriptions are very cookie cutter. And we want to know why a role is open and who the right person is for that role. So for us, I don't think it applies to us as much as it maybe does to some of the other staffing companies out there. And it kind of ties into the next statement that candidates were making. Recruiters don't fully understand the positions they're promoting. And that's true. If you think about a typical corporation, even their internal recruiters who come to work every day and can walk through the business, they went to school for human resources. They help, maintain an employee population, to make sure your benefits are in place, problems are resolved. But most recruiters, even internally, have never actually done the job that they're trying to fill. And so it's important that recruiters level set candidates that here's my background, here's what I do know, but here's what I don't know, and to try and give you a more balanced view of the role that they're working on. Another thing that came up was that recruiters come and go so frequently, especially with staffing firms. And that is true. The average turnover in a typical staffing firm, I think, is 2 years for a recruiter.
You're talking to a couple guys that have been in the business a long time though.
Yeah.
I've been with Impact 7 years, but Kurt's been doing recruiting very long time.
I just say over 25 years because I don't want to date myself. But I worked in industry for 7 years before getting recruited, ironically, into staffing for tech roles. And it was a good match for me. It leveraged what I went to school for and what I did professionally in a venue where I could help other people, move through their career. But the average, and I've worked for, some of the big box staffing companies in my past, and they're very formulaic, and they know that they should hire X number of people. And using their metrics, a certain percentage will make it and become career staffing professionals, but a large percentage won't. And so it is true, recruiters do come and go very frequently. Another thing, and it kind of ties into ghosting that respondents told us, is that recruiters don't provide solid feedback. And that's one thing we push against as much as we can here at Impact Business Group, is always asking not only for the candidates' feedback on the meetings they're having, but asking the hiring manager and the HR folks we partner with to give us really solid feedback on how the interview went. And what we really are looking for is not just that everybody loved it or everybody hated it. What we're looking for is inconsistencies in the feedback. If a candidate interviews and gets the wrong impression because they were nervous and they don't like interviewing, most of us don't, we want to determine if that's a misperception, because if it is, we want to clarify that. And we do the same with the employer, because maybe they misperceived something about your background as you went through the interview cycle. And so if we hear something from them that is inconsistent, we're going to get with you as the candidate to clarify that. And then we're going to go back to both parties, clear up the misperception. And then if it makes sense based on identifying something was misinterpreted, then we're going to get you talking again so you can clear the air face to face and make sure that a good match doesn't get missed because of the sort of artificial nature of interviewing. So for us, feedback is crucial. And Drew can speak to this, his team members and the ones I work with on tech positions, if we're not giving them feedback on a role we've asked them to work on, they stop supporting us and they tell us to go do our own recruiting. So in part of our business model, it is to get really good detailed feedback, both from candidates and from the clients that we work with.
Yeah. But in all fairness, I mean, we're only as good as the feedback that we get from our clients. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't always get it. We push as hard as we can, like Kurt was saying, but sometimes we don't get it. And so every now and again, you don't get feedback because we don't get feedback, but that's something we always push to get. We learn more from our failures than our successes. So if we're not filling a position of one of our clients is asking us to fill, we want to know why. We want to know why we're missing and why the candidates that interviewed didn't line up, so we can narrow that search further and find the right person. So that's something it's the constant battle every day.
Yeah. One of the comments too was they found no one who can promote them better than themselves. And I totally get that. And I really felt sorry for the person who gave that particular response, because the right recruiters will invest enough time to get to know who you are and what's important to you. And they should get to know their client well enough to know how your strengths line up to the role that they have open, so that they can actually do that, because we do this every day, and a candidate promotes themselves very infrequently throughout their career. So our challenge is we're a finite resource, each and every one of us. There's only so many hours in the day, but we do push here at Impact to try and do as much as we can to understand what's important to you, what's important to our customers, so that we can do a better job of promoting your strengths over your weaknesses to the clients that we're working with. And one of the things we do pride ourselves in is thinking outside the box. If there's a rational reason for why an individual's background really should fit a role, even if all the buzzwords don't line up, we're going to make that case and ask those questions with our clients. So we're going to do everything we can for a good person to get them an interview opportunity.
Yep. Adding a little bit more than just what's on paper is huge. Having the relationship with the hiring manager directly is one thing, but being able to speak to a candidate's personality and what their goals are, speak to why candidates made transitions, kind of talking through those with the hiring managers, to explain maybe some of those jumps in candidates' careers. Like we can do a lot in that aspect. It can go a long way.
Yeah, the way I have always promoted it is that we're your advocate behind the scenes as you go through the interview cycle. We're there to catch those misperceptions. We're also there to continually promote to the hiring authority why we felt you were someone they should talk to in the first place, because it does put our own reputation at risk if we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. So our goal is, let's make sure it's as good a match as possible. And then the rest is what we call work, where an individual who's missing a few skills gets to add those to their background to become more marketable. And an employer gets a good person who needs a minimal investment to come up to speed on the role that they need filled.
Not interested in a contract role, seeking direct hire roles only. I get this from time to time, and I think there's a perception that some people have that if staffing agencies only work on contract positions. So sure, there are certain staffing agencies that only work on contract positions, but we do both, obviously. And so I don't know. I mean, we work on a fair amount of both. In my line of work in accounting, finance, engineering, operations positions, it seems like 75% of the roles I work on are permanent direct hire roles. We see a little bit more contract in the IT space, and Kurt could speak to that. But either way, it doesn't hurt to talk with a recruiter, whether you're just looking for contract or you're just looking for permanent, with an agency like us, of course.
Yeah, I would say a bulk of the staffing companies that we compete with do focus predominantly on contracting roles. And the business logic behind that's simple. When someone is out contracting, they're doing hourly billable work, and a business and staffing can then project their revenue streams and their profit lines based on the hours that are going to be worked. Permanent hire roles, we do charge just a single placement fee once somebody actually is then hired. Those are harder to predict. And so the thing that some of the more Wall Street driven companies miss is that permanent hire roles can also lead to contracting opportunities, and contracting opportunities can lead to permanent hire roles. So the fact we do both and everything in between gives us, I think, a little more flexibility as to how we help a candidate find their next job. And if someone really does not want to do any contracting, that needs to be honored, and you focus on your permanent hire positions for that person. Contracting is more by volume, more prevalent these days, just due to some uncertainties in the market. But we actually write all of our contracts with our clients where there's an option for them to hire an individual. So we view contracting as more of a different delivery mechanism to still get the right person to the right job. And while you're contracting, you should be paid a little more per hour or annually than you would be in a permanent hire role as well. So contracting is something that has a lot of positives to it, but you'd really need to talk to one of our recruiters to learn more about that. But we do get some folks view that as too risky.
Too many calls and too few actual interviews. Well, we got a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of other recruiting agencies out there, of course. We focus on impact more on quality than quantity. And we tell our clients that, we're gonna send you fewer people that are actually going to be a better fit and they're going to align better, rather than backing up a dump truck full of resumes, because we have to hit metrics and send a certain amount of resumes out the door every day. So it's one of the advantages of working with us on both sides, really, is there are a lot of larger agencies out there that govern their recruiters and how many calls they make per day, how many resumes they send out the door, and we don't do that here. It's way more focused on quality than quantity. So we do our best to explore multiple opportunities. If we find a good candidate and we're on the phone with you, and if you don't align for the one that we're recruiting on right now, and you have a good background we think we can work with, we'll explore other opportunities with you too, and we'll throw different things at you and see what your thoughts are on different positions. So I would say, if you get a call from a recruiter, at least give them a couple minutes and hear them out, because you never know what they might have in store. Not today, but tomorrow, next week, a month from now. So never hurts to chat.
Yeah, I would say that comment probably comes from the fact that some firms just aren't focused on long-term. They're focused on only the positions they have open today. And Impact was built from a business model that was created years ago that basically recognizes we're not going to have the perfect role for every candidate open at every moment. And if you can meet a good person, get them registered in our database, put down what their drivers are, then we can become their eyes and ears to the job market. So when a role that is appropriate to them is something they'd be interested in, then we can call them to tell them about the role and make certain that they're still open to looking at something in the market. So our focus is not only filling what we have open today, but if we meet a good person, finding out what works for them down the road if the current role doesn't, meet their needs. And so you can either take a very short-term perspective and make a lot of phone calls, or you can take a long-term perspective and be more qualitative. And that's the model we try to use.
Yep. 100%. The last one, I have to pay a portion of my salary to the staffing agency. If that's the case, you're working with the wrong staffing agency. Most you don't. Most, it's always free to the candidate. The clients pay our fees, so you should never have to worry about that.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is a misperception when you work with an agency that somehow you're not getting the full compensation, and in what we work on, that is not the case. The fees for our services are a business expense. And if we're working with an employer, they have been struggling to fill the role themselves, and they are fully comfortable paying the placement fees that we charge to engage us for our services. And we never take any of that away from the candidate themselves. So for us, that is not an issue whatsoever. But we do know there are some varied staffing companies out there that may ask a candidate to pay a fee or to pay access to their clients. We just don't participate in that. And there's so many firms that work similar to the way we work that you should not have to pay any part of your compensation to the staffing firm itself.
As nice as that would be for us, right? But
Yeah,
I heard about it in the healthcare field for higher level doctors. That's a thing, but
sure.
yeah,
I think their pay grades blow away any of the stats we've already listed, though.
right. Market trends, increased project contract staffing at all levels. People are embracing the flexible workforce. Yeah, that's a fact. I've seen that. Evolving work-life balance, more scheduling flexibility for full-time employees. Obviously, we talked about that already. A lot of the hybrid and remote stuff popping up. That goes along with that next bullet point too. Kurt, you want to talk about those other three?
Yeah, well, the remote workers create more hiring flexibility for employers. I mean, it creates more job opportunities for candidates when an employer doesn't care where you sit. But we do point out to our clients that have very specialized skill set needs where maybe they're looking for skills that just don't exist in the local market yet. Maybe everybody's moving to something new. So having that flexibility to have someone work remote gives them a larger candidate pool that they can consider as long as they've put the proper governance in place to have a remote employee. Pretty much everybody had to during COVID. So the excuses that we've heard in the past about, investing in computing infrastructure and being able to logistically handle that, those don't really exist today. And so if an employer is struggling to fill something, even though they would prefer someone local who sits with the team, at some point they do have to realize to get the work done, they're going to have to accommodate somebody who's willing to work remote. And interestingly enough, I've had a number of consultants that I've talked to in the last few months where they have dug in their heels where normally they would move to where their next consulting assignment is going to be. And they're willing to forego interviewing opportunities that won't let them work 100% remote. Most folks are reasonable, saying, hey, I'll come in for a short period of time to get to know the team, the environment, what we're working on. But they're pretty adamant that they do want to continue working remote. And so we'd still see a fair amount of candidates who normally would work a traditional job, in town, with their team, who are now requesting that we find them an opportunity that lets them work either 100% remote or a higher percentage of remote work than what they have today. They've really seen the family benefits that come from that and the reduction in commuting costs and loss of time in their own day that come with remote work. So that is
I think if you're a job seeker, you also got to ask yourself, or ask us, of course, we can give you insight there all day, but if your line of work and your background, your career profession is something that is typically offered remote, is that a role that we see remote all the time, or is that a role that we see rarely remote? Because if you're actively looking to be in a remote position or hybrid position, and you're in a role, let's just say manufacturing engineer, for instance, it's going to be pretty tough to find a remote or hybrid manufacturing engineer role. Those companies want you on site. So unfortunately, there's those scenarios where you just it's going to be tough. And we've run into candidates. I've run into plenty of candidates, certain accounting roles too, like cost accounting positions, specifically cost accounting. We see heavily in the manufacturing space. They want those people on site at the plant. So although we see a lot of accounting finance roles going more remote recently, there's certain ones, like cost and controller, plant controller type positions that, just seem to be on site 90% of the time. So if you're hitting a wall with finding remote work, maybe the profession that you're in could be part of the issue.
Yeah, so the boomerang effect, moving right along. As much as we've been talking about folks wanting to be able to work remote, there is a significant number of employees and candidates that really want to come back to the office. They miss the team interaction. They miss the socialization. They miss, the sort of the discipline that comes with obviously being in the office. And so there is a fair number of candidates that really prefer to be able to leave the home environment and go into the work environment. And so employers certainly are going to have to accommodate that as well, even if they're going, full remote or highly hybrid. Personally, I did that years ago and found I'm not a good candidate for 100% remote.
I'm not either.
I need the socialization of the team and the challenge of the team, and I enjoy it. So I'm happy that here at Impact, we use a modified hybrid model. And actually our model is more based on common sense than anything else. If you're not feeling well, you're not feeling up to it, we have the gear. So work from home and don't make anyone else sick. COVID aside, you have things going on in your life. Our leadership's very good about, do your job, don't leave anyone hanging, but work remote when you need to. And so we've seen the benefit of that ourselves. But there is a definite trend going on in the general employment marketplace where people want to come back to the office. And I just heard, I think it was an article on NPR the other day where they benchmarked performance, and people hired 100% remote coming right out of school have not been as productive as folks who were hired pre-COVID from the standpoint of face-to-face mentorship and team dynamics. So there is some pressure, I guess you would say, to try to get people more on-site time for career development purposes. I think it'll vary by discipline, but there's definitely a push for that. So the boomerang effect is real, and it's going to continue. The next one, with baby boomers retiring, the baby boomers are still the largest numerical population in the workforce. And as they retire, if you hear a percentage, it may mask the fact that it's a large number of folks retiring, and these are usually leadership level candidates. And organizations have still failed to really come up with solid succession planning programs. And because of that, it is creating more vacancies and advancement opportunities into leadership at an earlier stage of career than at any time in the past. And we don't see that changing unless organizations get better at thinking ahead for succession planning. But the good news is, if you're a more junior individual on the staff, you may have sooner advancement opportunities in that environment. But if so, you need to get ready for leadership. So we can talk about that too if you're a candidate.
Buzzwords, quiet quitting. I'm not familiar with that one. Enlighten me. Enlighten me. I mean, I probably am. I'm just not maybe the way it's worded.
Well, the media latched onto that, and it made a lot of fun, going around the different media outlets. But quiet quitting is basically saying, I'm going to work 40 hours a week for 40 hours of pay. I'm not going to work 50, 60 hours a week for a 40-hour salaried exempt role. And as people have gone into, say, hourly consulting, where they are paid for every hour of work done, and in some cases paid an overtime rate, depending on their background, for anything over 40, more and more candidates have realized, I'm not going to put in 50 to 60 hours when in fact the employer is basing everything about my compensation and benefits on a minimum 40-hour work week. So quiet quitting is just saying, I'm not going to do the 50 to 60 hours anymore. I'm going to do the 40 to 45 hours and then head on home. COVID gave everybody a taste of what it's like to not have a commute and have more free time in your personal day. And the truth is, if you're working a side hustle outside of your core job, you'd get paid for every hour of work that you do. And so I think quiet quitting is just a recognition that for a long time, people have worked a lot of free overtime. And that does tie into the debate going on right now about a 4-day work week, giving people the option to work 4 10s instead of 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And there are studies coming out that are showing productivity actually goes up, not down, when you do that. So that's another new buzzword, new topic that's hitting the employment circles.
See that a lot of manufacturing lately, going to 4 10s at least.
Yeah.
And and a lot of the floor level positions and even, well, production in general, manufacturing plants. And so when production moves to a 4-day week, then of course the supervisors and engineers and everything else will follow too. So I've definitely
Right.
seen it in that space quite a bit.
Yep. And we've heard the great resignation, people wanting to have a better quality of life and resigning the roles that they have to do it. And in many cases, we're coupled with that, we're seeing people do career transitions later in their career, switching from a given discipline and industry into a totally new type of role. And understanding there is, a cost to do that in terms of the training you'll need and then starting over in a different discipline. But COVID and the rebound of the economy, I think, have afforded that, where if you have a passion for something else than what you've been doing for your day job, there have been opportunities for you to actually do that kind of a transition. And then finally, AI, it's the hot topic these days, Chat GPT and all the other forms of AI entering into everything from how a resume is created to how a job description is put together to a job posting to anything related to documentation or the automation of different functions. We're not sure where all of it's going. There's a ton of debate and the media is having a lot of fun with it right now. But we have seen it applied in various ways related to staffing, and it is here to stay. It is going to continue. Everything from a chatbot trying to answer your basic questions about an employer you're applying to different forms of automation being applied to analyzing resumes. I don't think anyone's going to get hired or fired based on AI, but it is being applied to a lot of different tools and techniques that normally would be done manually. And so hopefully we get that figured out so it's accurate and nobody gets missed in the shuffle because of the use of AI. But Skynet is not alive yet. So if you're a fan of the Terminator series, we're not to that point yet.
Any other questions anybody has? Feel free to ask now, or, give us a call, shoot us an email, get a hold of us. Happy to help provide any insight that we can.
Yeah. And,
Of course, if we don't,
that would apply to both employers and candidates, so if you're a hiring manager who's struggling to get your roles filled, we're happy to talk, see how we can help. And for candidates, of course, we're happy to review your background and then give you guidance as to what we're seeing as job opportunities for you.
Yep. If you haven't taken a look at our job board, take a look at that, keep an eye on it, sign up for it. You can get alerts based on what you're looking for. So get on our website, get a hold of us, follow our social media, and hopefully we can connect with you if we haven't already.
Yep. For sessions like this, we do record them and then we do put them up on our website as well. We have various blogs and other topics, podcasts, and other things that we do to talk about current trends in staffing. So our website is pretty robust with all sorts of background information related to hiring and job searching. And at the end of the day, if you don't see what you need, talk to one of our recruiters. That's what we're here for. So if anyone has any questions, now would be your last chance to ask those. Otherwise, we really thank you for attending and participating both in the survey and in this webinar.
All right. Awesome. You guys take it easy.
Thank you, everyone.